Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and looked at the engine display one more time. The numbers looked good, but something felt wrong. He had been fixing machines for 15 years, and his gut never lied to him. The cargo ship New Horizon hummed quietly around him as it moved through space toward their next delivery stop. Jake was not special by any measure. He stood average height with brown hair that always seemed messy, no matter how much he combed it. His clothes were simple work gear covered in oil stains and small burn marks from welding jobs. Most people forgot his name 5 minutes after meeting him. But Jake could fix anything that broke, and he never gave up on a problem until he solved it. Captain Rodriguez called over the ship radio. "Jake, how long until we reach Kepler Station?" "2 more hours if the engines stay happy," Jake replied while checking a loose connection. "But I think we should run a full diagnostic when we dock. Something does not feel right." The captain laughed. "Your feelings about engines are usually right, but we cannot be late again. The mining company pays us good money to be on time." Jake shrugged and went back to his work. The New Horizon was not a fancy ship, but it was reliable. They carried supplies and equipment between Earth colonies and the outer systems. The work was boring, but it paid well, and Jake liked the quiet of space. 20 minutes later, everything went wrong at once. Alarms started screaming throughout the ship, and the lights flickered. Jake felt the engine stutter and knew they were in serious trouble. He ran to the bridge where Captain Rodriguez was staring at displays filled with red warning messages. "What hit us?" Jake asked. "Nothing hit us," the captain said. "Some kind of energy wave just passed through our ship. The navigation computer is completely dead and life support is running on backup power." Jake looked at the readings and his heart sank. The energy wave had fried most of their electronic systems. They could still fly, but they had no idea where they were or how to get home. Worse yet, the oxygen recycling system was damaged and they only had 3 days of air left. "There," pointed Susan Clark, the ship communications officer. "I am picking up a signal from that planet. It looks like there might be an atmosphere we can breathe." Captain Rodriguez made the decision quickly. "We land there and fix what we can. Jake, can you get us down safely with manual controls?" "I can try," Jake said. He had never landed a ship without computer help, but he understood how all the systems worked. "But it will not be smooth." The landing was rough, but they made it down in one piece. Jake immediately started checking the outside of the ship for damage while the rest of the crew worked on internal repairs. What he found was not good. The energy wave had melted several important components, and they would need at least a week to fix everything properly. As Jake worked under the ship, he heard voices speaking in languages he did not recognize. He crawled out from under the hull and saw something that made him stop breathing. Dozens of alien creatures were gathered in a large circle about 200 yards away from their ship. The aliens were like nothing Jake had ever seen or imagined. Some looked like they were made of pure light that shifted and moved like living electricity. Others were tall insect-like beings with multiple arms and shiny black shells. There were creatures that appeared to be made of living crystal that sparkled in the sunlight, and beings that seemed to float in the air without any visible means of support. In the center of their gathering was a massive holographic display showing star charts. Jake could see red zones spreading across the display like a disease infecting the galaxy. The aliens were clearly upset about something, and their voices grew louder and more urgent as they pointed at the spreading red areas. Jake crept closer to get a better look. His engineering training helped him understand technical displays even when he could not understand the words being spoken. The red zones were moving and growing larger. Whatever they represented was spreading fast, and the aliens were running out of time to stop it. One of the crystal beings noticed Jake watching and pointed at him. Several other aliens turned to look, but they seemed to dismiss him as unimportant. They went back to their urgent discussion as if he was just another piece of background scenery. Jake realized he was witnessing something far more important than a simple trade meeting. These aliens were facing a crisis that threatened their entire civilization, and they had no idea that one human maintenance worker was about to change everything. Jake spent the next 2 days pretending to work on ship repairs while secretly watching the alien gathering. He learned to recognize the different species and began to understand their crisis through their actions and the technical displays they showed each other. The beings made of light seemed to be trying some kind of energy solution. They would focus their glowing forms into tight beams and fire them at small holographic targets. Each time they tried this, the target would briefly stabilize before dissolving completely. Jake could see their frustration growing with each failed attempt. The insect warriors took a more direct approach. They brought out weapons that looked impossibly advanced and fired them at test objects. The weapons created impressive explosions and left huge craters in the ground, but whatever they were fighting seemed to absorb the attacks and grow stronger. After 3 days of weapons testing, the insect beings started arguing among themselves in harsh, clicking sounds. The crystal creatures appeared to be the scientists of the group. They created complex mathematical equations in the air using their natural light and ran countless calculations. Jake watched them work for hours, but every equation ended the same way, with the crystals dimming and their light turning from bright white to sad blue. On the 4th day, Jake saw something that changed his understanding of the situation. A young crystal being was working alone on a small device when Jake accidentally dropped his wrench. The tool rolled across the ground and bumped into the crystal's equipment. When metal touched crystal, there was a brief flash of light, and for just a moment the device displayed stable readings. The other crystals dismissed this as meaningless coincidence, but Jake knew better. In his years of fixing machines, he had learned that sometimes the simplest solutions worked when complex ones failed. The aliens were trying to solve their problem using the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but maybe they needed something more basic. Jake began to study the aliens more carefully. Every species seemed to rely on energy manipulation or quantum effects or other advanced sciences that he barely understood. But humans still use simple mechanical tools to solve problems. They still turned screws and used leverage and applied direct physical force to make things work. From what Jake could observe, the red zones on their display were spreading faster each day. Entire star systems were disappearing, and the aliens were becoming desperate. Their most brilliant minds and most powerful weapons were useless against whatever was destroying their galaxy. Captain Rodriguez found Jake staring at the alien gathering instead of working on repairs. "What are you doing?" "We need to get off this planet before we run out of food." "Captain, I think these aliens are facing something terrible. Look at their display. Those red areas are growing every day." "Not our problem, Jake. We are cargo haulers, not diplomats. Fix the ship so we can leave." But Jake could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed. That night he lay in his bunk and tried to understand the pattern of the spreading red zones. The aliens saw them as random destruction, but Jake noticed something different. The zones followed specific routes through space, like someone was following a map or a set of instructions. The next morning, Jake made a decision that would change the fate of the universe. Instead of continuing to hide his interest, he walked directly toward the alien gathering. The beings noticed him approaching, and several of the insect warriors moved to block his path. "Wait," Jake called out in basic English, hoping their universal translators would work. "I think I might be able to help." The crystal being that had experienced the wrench incident spoke up in a musical voice. "This primitive creature cannot possibly understand our crisis. Its species has barely achieved interstellar travel." "Maybe that is exactly why I can help," Jake replied. "You have all tried advanced solutions and they have all failed. Sometimes the oldest and simplest approaches work best." A tall ethereal being that seemed to be in charge floated forward. Its voice was like wind through empty space. "You dare to interrupt the galactic concord? Your species is not even represented in our alliance." "I do not represent humanity," Jake said. "I am just a mechanic who fixes broken things. And from what I can see, you have something very broken that needs fixing." The aliens began arguing among themselves. Some wanted to remove Jake immediately, while others were curious about his boldness. The young crystal being spoke up again. "What do you think you see that we have missed?" Jake pointed at their holographic display. You are all trying to fight whatever is causing those red zones. But what if it is not an enemy? What if it is just a machine that is broken and needs to be repaired? The silence that followed was deafening. None of the aliens had considered that possibility. They had assumed they were facing a malevolent force or an ancient weapon. The idea that it might be a malfunctioning system had never occurred to their advanced minds. Explain your reasoning, demanded the ethereal leader. Jake took a deep breath and began to share his observations about the patterns he had noticed in the spreading zones. Jake stood before the assembled alien council feeling like a child trying to explain mathematics to professors. The beings towered over him with technology beyond his comprehension, yet he was about to tell them they were thinking about their problem all wrong. Look at the pattern, Jake said, pointing to the holographic display. The red zones are not spreading randomly. They follow the old hyperspace routes that connect major star systems. Something is moving along established pathways like it is following a map. The crystal being called Zarthik created a new display showing the expansion pattern over time. The human is correct. The entity follows predictable routes, but we assume this was strategic targeting of important systems. What if it is not targeting anything? Jake asked. What if it is just following its programming? I have seen machines do this before. A cleaning robot will methodically work through every room in a building, even if most of the rooms are already clean. It does not think about efficiency, it just follows its instructions. Several aliens made sounds that Jake interpreted as laughter or scorn. The insect warrior leader clicked aggressively. This primitive suggests our cosmic destroyer is merely a malfunctioning maintenance device? Ridiculous. But the ethereal council leader floated closer to Jake. Continue your explanation, human. What evidence supports this theory? Jake felt sweat forming on his forehead, but he pressed on. Every time you attack the spreading zones, they grow faster. That is exactly what happens when you apply the wrong solution to a broken machine. The system interprets interference as a sign that it needs to work harder. The energy beings tried to communicate with the entity but made no progress. If this was an intelligent enemy, it would have responded somehow. Machines do not communicate. They just run their programs. Your weapons make the expansion accelerate instead of slowing it down. This suggests the entity is converting your attacks into fuel for its operation. Again, this is typical behavior for certain types of automated systems. The young Zarthik began creating calculations in the air. If the human is correct, then we need to find the control mechanisms for this ancient machine. But how do we locate something that old? The same way I find any control system, Jake replied. You trace the connections back to the source. Every machine has a power supply and a control center. We need to find where this thing gets its energy and where its instructions come from. The council leader's form shimmered with what Jake hoped was interest rather than anger. Your species lacks the technology to analyze cosmic-scale phenomena. How could you possibly help us locate control systems? Because I do not need to understand how something works to figure out how to turn it off, Jake said. I just need to find the switch. Every machine has one somewhere. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Half the aliens thought Jake was wasting precious time with primitive nonsense. The other half were desperate enough to try anything since their advanced approaches had failed completely. Finally, an ancient being that looked like living metal spoke in a voice like grinding gears. We have exhausted our conventional options. 3 more star systems disappeared while we argued today. If this human thinks he can help, let him try. Zarthik approached Jake with something resembling excitement. I will work with you. When your metal tool touched my equipment, it created a resonance I have never seen before. Perhaps primitive technology can interact with ancient systems in ways our advanced methods cannot. What do you need from us? Asked the council leader. Jake thought carefully before answering. Access to your historical records. If this machine is as old as you think, then someone must have built it. There should be records or legends or at least stories about who created it and why. Also, I need to understand what the red zones actually do. You call it destruction, but I need to know exactly what happens when this machine processes a star system. The ethereal being pulsed with energy. Very well. You will have access to our archives and our analysis data. But know this, human, if you fail, millions more beings will die while we waste time on your theory. I understand, Jake replied. But if I'm right, then fighting this thing will only make it worse. We need to fix it, not destroy it. The aliens provided Jake with a translation device and access to their vast databases. What he found in the historical archives changed his understanding of the universe itself. Deep in records older than human civilization were references to something called the Great Clearing Dot, according to the most ancient texts. Beings of incredible power had once reshaped entire galaxies for purposes the records did not clearly explain. They had used tools called entropy engines to disassemble matter at the molecular level and prepare space for massive construction projects. Jake realized they were not facing a cosmic destroyer, but a cosmic construction tool that had been running its program for millions of years. The machine was clearing space exactly as it had been designed to do. The problem was that when it was built, there had been no intelligent life in the areas it was programmed to clear. We are not being attacked, Jake told the assembled council. We are being cleaned up. This machine thinks our civilizations are debris that needs to be removed before the real work can begin. The implications were staggering, and the solution would require cooperation between all the alien species and abilities that only humans seem to possess. The discovery that they faced an ancient construction tool rather than a cosmic destroyer changed everything for the Alien Council. Jake found himself at the center of the greatest crisis in galactic history, working with beings whose technology seemed like magic to him. Zarthik had become his closest ally among the aliens. The young crystal being possessed both the scientific knowledge to understand the technical aspects of their problem and the open mind to accept that human approaches might succeed where alien methods had failed. The archive data confirms your theory, Zarthik told Jake as they studied holographic displays in the crystal species research facility. The entropy engine was designed to clear approximately 60% of our galaxy. If it completes its original programming, it will process every inhabited world, including your Earth. Jake stared at the galactic map showing the projected path of destruction. Billions of civilizations would cease to exist if they could not find a way to stop or reprogram the ancient machine. The weight of responsibility felt crushing, but he pushed the fear aside and focused on the technical problem. The records mention control nodes, Jake said, reading through the translated text. 3 of them located in different dimensions of space. We need to access all 3 to shut down the system or change its programming. Accessing dimensional barriers requires technology from multiple species working together, explained Dr. Keflon of the Silicon Collective. The energy beings can open portals, but only the crystal folk can stabilize them. The insect warriors must provide protection while the metal beings fabricate the necessary interface equipment. Jake nodded slowly. And you need humans because the control nodes use mechanical interfaces that your advanced technology cannot operate. Precisely, Zarthik confirmed. The archive describes primitive harmonic resonance as a key component of the control system. Your species retained mechanical engineering skills that we evolved beyond millions of years ago. The preparation for their mission took 3 days, during which Jake worked more closely with alien technology than any human in history. The different species had to modify their most advanced equipment to interface with human mechanical tools. It was like connecting a computer to a hammer, but somehow they made it work. Captain Rodriguez and the crew of the New Horizon had been watching Jake's activities with growing amazement and concern. Jake, what exactly are you doing with these aliens? The captain asked. We fixed the ship 2 days ago, but you have not come back. I am trying to save the galaxy, Jake replied. Simply. These beings are facing extinction, and I think I can help them. You are a maintenance engineer, not a cosmic hero, Susan Clark protested. We should leave before we get caught up in some alien war. But Jake had made his decision. The ship is repaired. You can leave without me if you want. But I cannot walk away from this. The Alien Council had authorized the construction of a special ship called the Cosmic Endeavor that combined technology from all 12 species. Jake marveled at the vessel, which looked like it had been grown rather than built. Living crystal formed the hull, while energy conduits pulsed with power from the ethereal beings. Mechanical interfaces designed specifically for human operation were seamlessly integrated into systems. He could barely comprehend the first control node existed in a pocket dimension that could only be reached through Zephyrian energy portals. Jake and his team of alien specialists prepared for a journey into space where the laws of physics operated differently than anything in normal reality. "Remember," Zarthik warned as they approached the portal, "in dimensional space you're mechanical. Tools will work normally, but our energy-based technology becomes unpredictable. You will be our primary interface with the control systems." Jake gripped his toolkit tighter and tried not to think about how many ways this mission could go wrong. The portal opened in front of them, revealing a swirling tunnel of colors that hurt to look at directly. The Cosmic Endeavor entered the dimensional barrier, and Jake felt reality twist around him. On the other side, they found themselves in a space that defied description. The control node appeared as a massive crystalline structure floating in a void where stars seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Distance and direction had no consistent meaning, and Jake felt his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "The node is active," reported Commander Yixara from the Stellar Nomads, "but our instruments cannot analyze its functions. The dimensional distortion interferes with our sensors." Jake put on his environmental suit and prepared to spacewalk to the control node. "My instruments are mechanical. They should work fine here." As he approached the ancient structure, Jake could see that it was indeed a machine, but built on a scale that dwarfed anything humans had ever constructed. The control interfaces were clearly designed for beings with human-like proportions and mechanical understanding. Symbols covered the surfaces in patterns that looked almost familiar. Working with tools that his grandfather might have recognized, Jake began the delicate process of interfacing with technology older than his species. Each adjustment he made sent feedback through the dimensional space, causing the Cosmic Endeavor's alien crew to report changes in the entropy engine's behavior. "The expansion rate is decreasing," Zarthik announced. "Your modifications are working. But this is only the first of 3 nodes." Jake completed the calibration of the first control node and felt a mixture of relief and dread. They had proven the approach would work, but the next 2 nodes would be even more dangerous to reach. The success at the first control node had given the Alien Council hope, but Jake knew the hardest work still lay ahead. The second node existed in normal space, but was surrounded by temporal distortions that made time flow at different rates in different locations. The third node was inside the entropy engine itself, where a few beings could survive. Jake studied the data about the second node while the Cosmic Endeavor traveled through hyperspace. The temporal distortions were created by an ancient species called the Eternal Scribes, who had been trying to slow down time around the node to give themselves more opportunity to study it. Instead, they had created a maze of time streams where a person could age decades in minutes or become frozen for centuries. "The scribes have been working on this problem for over 1,000 years, explained Elder Nixara, whose species existed partially outside normal time. "They can navigate the temporal barriers, but they cannot interface with the mechanical systems. You will need to work quickly to avoid the worst time distortions." Jake nodded grimly. "How quickly?" "You will have approximately 10 minutes in normal time before the accelerated time streams begin to affect your aging process. After that, every minute of work will cost you months or years of life." The implications were clear. Jake would need to perform complex mechanical repairs on cosmic-scale machinery while racing against time streams that could kill him through rapid aging. It was like trying to defuse a bomb while running a marathon when they reached the second node. Jake was amazed to see a structure even larger than the first one. This control node appeared to be a massive clockwork mechanism with gears, the size of moons and springs that stretched across distances measured in light minutes. The entire mechanism had been running for millions of years and showed signs of wear. The mechanical components are breaking down, Jake observed as he studied the readings. The original builders never expected this system to run for so long. Some of the gears have worn smooth and the timing mechanisms are out of alignment. Jake put on his environmental suit and loaded his toolkit with spare parts fabricated by the alien engineers. The temporal distortions created rainbow-colored streams in space that showed where time flowed at different rates, following a path. Mapped by the eternal scribes, Jake began his approach to the failing machinery. The work was unlike anything he had ever attempted. Jake found himself welding components larger than buildings while floating in space surrounded by forces that could age him to death in seconds if he made a wrong turn. The alien crew provided guidance and materials, but the actual repairs required human hands and human understanding of mechanical systems. The primary drive gear has a stress fracture, Jake reported through his radio. I need to remove it and install a replacement, but the gear weighs more than my entire ship. We can provide gravitational manipulation to assist with the heavy lifting, offered Dr. Keflon. But you must guide the installation process. For the next 8 minutes, Jake performed cosmic-scale mechanical engineering while time streams swirled around him like deadly currents. He had to replace worn components, reinforce failing structures, and recalibrate timing mechanisms that controlled the flow of energy across dimensional barriers. With 30 seconds remaining before the time distortions became lethal, Jake completed the final adjustment. The massive clockwork mechanism resumed proper operation and the second control node came back online. The entropy engine's expansion rate dropped by another 40%. 2 down, 1 to go, Jake gasped as the cosmic endeavor pulled him back to safety. But everyone knew the third node would be the most dangerous challenge yet, the final control. Node was located at the center of the entropy engine itself within the expanding zone of nothingness where matter, energy, and spacetime were being systematically disassembled. No normal matter could survive in that environment, but Jake's team had developed a desperate plan. They would use the engine's own disassembly process to transport Jake to the core in a special protective capsule. The capsule was designed to resist entropy conversion just long enough for Jake to reach the control systems and make the necessary modifications. After that, they would have to extract him before the protection failed. The margin for error is essentially zero, Zarthik explained, as they prepared the capsule. If any step of this plan fails even by seconds, you will be converted to pure energy along with everything else in the entropy field. Jake climbed into the capsule, which looked more like a coffin than a spacecraft. The interior was packed with mechanical tools and emergency supplies, but there was barely room for him to move. How long do I have once I reach the core? Based on our calculations, the protective systems will hold for approximately 15 minutes, Commander Yixara replied. After that point, entropy conversion becomes irreversible. The launch into the entropy field was the most terrifying experience of Jake's life. The capsule shook and groaned as fundamental forces tried to tear it apart molecule by molecule. Through the small viewport, Jake could see reality itself being disassembled around him as stars, planets, and entire solar systems were reduced to their component atoms. At the center of the destruction, he found something beautiful and terrible. The entropy engine's core was not just a machine, but a monument to the civilization that had built it. Ancient beings who had transcended physical existence had created this tool as part of a plan to reshape the galaxy into something perfect and eternal, but their calculations had been based on empty space. They never imagined that primitive matter would someday evolve into the diverse, intelligent civilizations that now filled the galaxy. The engine was destroying the very miracle of life that had emerged in the universe. Jake faced the hardest decision of his life as alarms warned him that his protective capsule was beginning to fail. Jake stared at the control center of the entropy engine while alarms screamed warnings about his failing protective systems. He had minutes to make a decision that would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The ancient builders had left detailed instructions carved into crystalline surfaces that covered the walls. Through his translation device, Jake could understand their purpose and their tragedy. These beings had possessed godlike power and had planned to transform the galaxy into a work of art that would last forever. The engine was meant to clear empty space and prepare it for construction of wonders beyond imagination. But the builders had made their plans when the galaxy was young and life was rare. They could not have known that given enough time, simple matter would organize itself into countless civilizations. The engine was faithfully executing its program, unaware that it was destroying the greatest miracle the universe had ever produced. Jake could simply shut down the system and save current civilization. But doing so would abandon the magnificent construction project that could transform the galaxy into something beautiful beyond description. He could modify the engine to work around inhabited worlds, but that would delay the great work for millions of years. Then, Jake had an idea that combined everything he had learned from working with 12 different alien species. Instead of stopping the engine or working around it, he could reprogram it to work with the existing civilizations. The system could incorporate inhabited worlds as integral parts of the grand design rather than obstacles to be removed. The modification required Jake to connect human mechanical interfaces with alien quantum processing systems while cosmic forces tried to tear apart his protective capsule. His hands shook as he worked with tools that seemed impossibly primitive compared to the ancient technology surrounding him. "Jake, your life support is failing," Zarthik's voice crackled through the radio. "You need to complete the work and get out now." "Almost finished," Jake replied as he made the final connections. "The new programming is uploading, but I need to verify the changes before I leave." The entropy engine's behavior began to change immediately. Instead of converting matter to energy for storage, the system started converting empty space into useful materials. The expanding zones of nothingness became expanding zones of abundance as the engine created infrastructure that connected every inhabited world in the galaxy. Space elevators grew like crystal trees between planets, while energy collectors formed networks that could power entire civilizations. Matter transmutation facilities appeared in empty space, converting asteroids and dead worlds into resources that could support billions of lives. Transportation networks connected distant star systems with travel times measured in hours rather than years. "It is working," Jake said in amazement as he watched the engine's new program take effect. "The system is building rather than destroying. It is creating shared infrastructure that makes all species dependent on each other for survival." But Jake's moment of triumph was interrupted by the final failure of his protective systems. Entropy began affecting his equipment, and he realized he would not survive to see the full results of his work. The cosmic forces that surrounded him were beyond anything designed to protect human life. His alien teammates refused to abandon him. In a desperate coordinated effort, all 12 species combined their most advanced technologies in an attempt to extract Jake from the engine's core. Energy beings provided power while crystal entities created quantum tunnels. Metal species fabricated emergency equipment while insect warriors coordinated the rescue operation. The extraction was successful, but barely. Jake was pulled from the entropy field with seconds to spare, but the exposure to cosmic forces had changed him permanently. He could sense the flow of energy through the galaxy's new infrastructure and understand the connections between distant civilizations in ways that no human had ever experienced. When Jake returned to Earth, he was greeted as a hero, but he found that fame did not satisfy him. What gave him real pleasure was returning to simple mechanical work. He opened a small repair shop in his hometown where he fixed everything from kitchen appliances to spacecraft engines. Visitors came from across the galaxy to meet the human who had saved the universe, but they found Jake more interested in explaining basic mechanical principles than discussing cosmic events. He spent his time teaching young engineers that complex problems often had simple solutions and that different perspectives could reveal possibilities that expertise alone missed. The galaxy continued to evolve under the guidance of the modified entropy engine. The shared infrastructure created by Jake's reprogramming made cooperation between species not just beneficial but essential. Wars became impossible because damaging another Civilization's worlds would disrupt the systems that supported all life. Human mechanical engineering became a valued discipline studied by civilizations across the stars. Universities that had existed for millions of years added courses on primitive problem-solving and basic tool usage. The greatest minds in the galaxy learned to appreciate the power of simple, direct solutions. Jake trained a new generation of human engineers in the principles that had saved the galaxy. He taught them that the most sophisticated problems often required surprisingly basic approaches. He showed them that sometimes the most primitive tool was exactly what was needed to fix the most advanced system. Years later, when asked about his cosmic adventure, Jake would smile and return to his workbench. "I just fixed a broken machine," he would say. That is what mechanics do. The final legacy of Jake Morrison was not just that he saved the universe, but that he proved the value of human thinking in a cosmos that had forgotten the power of simple solutions. The galaxy was forever changed not by advanced technology or superior weapons, but by the practical wisdom of one ordinary man who understood that every complex machine was built from simple parts.